I'm here with Julia Chiappetta, Greenwich resident. Thanks for sitting down with me today.
This is fun. I'm glad to be here.
Great. All right, we'll get started. So, I read your About Me section on your website. It seems like you've done a little bit of everything. Can you talk to me about everything you've done?
Well, the umbrella on my website really focuses on my business background. So I was a meeting planner in the travel industry for many, many years, traveled the globe, producing meetings and events, crazy life, cell phone attached to your ear, constantly problem solving. And in 2000, I was living a great life, what I thought was a great life, traveling, making some money, feeling as though all of my years of preparation were paying off. And I was an extreme athlete. I was doing a lot of races and training for 3 or 4 hours a day in the gym. And then suddenly in 2000, my life changed when I found a lump when I was self-examining. My gynecologist at the time was a very good friend, and when I turned 30, which is very young to be thinking about breast cancer at that time, but not now, she said, I'm going to teach you how to self-examine because one day this is going to be a tool that's really going to help you. So I decided, great, I'll learn this technique, and I started implementing it. Well, fast forward 14 years later, one Sunday night, lying in bed doing my monthly self-exam, I found what felt like a little mosquito bite on the outer edge of my right breast. And I thought, well, this is strange because I'm in Connecticut, it's March, and it couldn't be a mosquito bite. So I went to see her the next day, and she sent me for a mammogram. The mammogram was negative, as had been the mammogram in December, a few months prior to that. But I just knew, I had a gut feeling, and I just knew that something was not right. It didn't feel like the others I had felt, because you kind of get used to what's normal for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the surgeon really gave me a hard time and told me that it was nothing, don't worry about it, you're going to be fine, just come back in 6 months. And I said, I'm really not comfortable with that. And I kind of had to negotiate with him and almost beg and plead with tears to have a biopsy. So they finally scheduled the biopsy for the next day, begrudgingly, like, you don't know what you're talking about, kind of. And the following day, the surgeon called me, and the first words out of his mouth were, I'm really sorry. I learned a very important lesson today. I learned that I need to listen to my patients more closely. You do have stage 2B infiltrating ductal carcinoma. It's a very fast-growing cancer, and then all the characteristics of the cancer. You need to do something immediately. So the first thing I did was get on my knees and pray because that's how I process everything. God is really my rock. And then I told a gentleman who I just met at my gym, who I was training with, who had only been in town for a year, a younger guy who was working for GE. He was a scientist and he had some medical background. And I told him what was happening because we were supposed to train that day. And he said, you know what, I'm going to help you do the research and get your brain around what you're dealing with. So God kind of sent that angel to me. And he made good on his promise. He came over 2 or 3 nights a week. We scoured the website. Now, mind you, this was back in 2000. There weren't a lot of good websites in terms of alternative protocols, natural protocols, which I really was seeking. I wanted to seek, well, why did this happen? And, what could I do to make changes in my life to get healthier? And of course, I thought I was healthy at the time. I was running, working out, lean, in good shape. But, it's not one thing, it's 20 things. And it's maybe 20 years. So we started doing research, and I found some great doctors who were doing some amazing protocols, natural therapy, and basically it was diet and lifestyle focused. So it was kind of going back to the basics of eating and living your life and eliminating stress and trying to make some positive changes to your environment, the people in your environment. So it's not only about the food, it's about the toxic people in your life and, the toxic situations that you allow to creep in. So I started implementing some changes based on the research. And so what I did was I cleaned out my entire house. I dumped everything, food, makeup, cleaning solutions, everything in my house, my microwave, everything that could have been toxic or was toxic. And I started fresh. So I got an air ionizer, an alkaline ionized water unit for my faucet to drink good, clean, ionized, alkaline water. I started implementing a raw vegan diet. My platform was wheatgrass, coconut oil, fruits and vegetables, big salads, heaped with, seeds and nuts and chia seeds and quinoa and, all these things that I never heard of because I'm Italian and I was eating, cheese and pasta and, the Mediterranean diet. So it was difficult, but then it was actually really exciting for me. And I know that sounds crazy because I have cancer and I'm like saying it was exciting. But what was exciting was being able to be part of my own healing platform and feeling empowered by doing all this research. Now, I obviously didn't do that alone. I found a good naturopath and some other doctors who were actually doing some testing so that I could know and understand what my body was lacking. So I think it's important to have the science and to understand through diagnostic testing. Well, I was very low in iodine, I was very low in vitamin D and some of the B vitamins. So all of this was substantiated by, diagnostic testing. But then the so-called cancer diet really is putting into your body those things that are superfoods, that are high value in terms of getting nutrition into your body. So
What are those?
wheatgrass is probably the number one thing. I mean, if I had to, people always ask me, well, if you have to pick one thing, what would it be? And I say wheatgrass, because wheatgrass, 1 ounce of wheatgrass equals the superfoods, antioxidants, enzymes, vitamins, and minerals that you would get if you ate like twice this table of green leafies. So 2.5 pounds of green leafies. And you're doing this in a little shot.
Right.
So at the time, there was just this one little juice bar in town that was doing this, and so I was going there every day, 2-3 times a day for my 1 ounce shots, twice a day, 3 times a day of wheatgrass, and then I was juicing at home. So I was doing a lot of green. Green is good. Green is the staple for the cancer diet or for any healthy protocol, and eating, kind of going back to the basics of the way my grandmother used to eat, because she was Italian and she had a huge garden, and we lived off of that garden when we were kids, right in Coscob, Connecticut. We had this huge garden, and she composted, and it was organic soil, and so she was really ahead of her time. And so I got back to the basics of eating from the earth. So essentially, raw food vegan means you don't eat anything with a mother. So
That's a good way to put
think
it.
about it. And it was hard at first, but I learned how to, and I learned recipes and, some fun ways to make my food interesting and to make it taste good. But actually, after 2 or 3 months of implementing this new protocol, I felt great. Like I couldn't even believe I had cancer. Like this can't be possible. I feel so good. And I was getting better rest and drinking better water, and I also eliminated a lot of the stress in my life. So at the time, I was in a toxic relationship. I was engaged to be married, and it really wasn't a good relationship. And so I severed the ties, with the fiance, and actually gave up a lot of my business that I had, worked and built up. So I was, when you're in your early 40s, you're at that time where you're reaping sort of the benefits of working really hard in your 20s and 30s. And but I decided to give up my 6-figure income and all that entailed, which was a very stressful life, travel, having to be a problem solver 24/7, which is stressful, and decided to work part-time, meaning 45 hours or 50 hours a week instead of 90 hours a week. So that was part-time for me.
Yeah.
And learning how to live on less. so earning about a third of what I used to earn. So implementing these changes as I went along. And in the middle of all that, I was seeing doctors, I was seeing professionals, people who I trusted, who I had either seen on webinars or had gone to seminars and met, and they were actually my team, and they were, because I'm not a doctor. I had to become an expert for myself, for my body, and that was based on research, on the experts that I respected and trusted, and God. So I had a total peace about my decision throughout this entire process. And I remember saying to my parents, well, if this is the way I'm going to die, if breast cancer is going to be the path to, the end, then I would like to do it my way, in terms of doing it so that I could have as much quality of life left and be able to do things I like to do, like run and work out and, do Pilates and weight training and traveling a little bit.
And you were able to do all of that.
And I was able to do that. I did it in moderation when I was, just implementing the plan of care. I went from working out 4 hours a day to 1 hour a day. But I wanted to be able to enjoy my family, enjoy my life and friends, and maybe take another trip to Italy and eat some pasta in Tuscany. But so I sort of accepted the fact that death is 100%, and if this was my way, then I was going to be as happy as I could, and I didn't want to be puking over a toilet bowl and losing all my hair. You know how we feel about our hair.
Went that route.
No, so I went for a third opinion. So my first biopsy was at Greenwich Hospital. They sent my pathology to Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. That was my second opinion. My third opinion was at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. So prayers are being answered rapidly during this time. And my cousin called me one day, who lives down there, and said, I really would love for you to come down and meet with probably one of the top docs in the country for breast cancer. Cool guy, very nice guy, know him. I'm going to set it up. Takes usually a year to get on his calendar, but I'm going to set it up for you. So a month later, I was down in Houston. I flew down to Houston. Now, when I got there, they had requested all of my files, reports, tests for the 10 years leading up to the breast cancer diagnosis. So when I got there, I walked into what was like a business meeting about my body. So they had all my information. It was a little strange, but it was actually very comforting because they knew everything about me. So there was a doctor, there was a PA, an intern, 2 nurses, all these people in this board meeting, which is what I called it. And so they were like, okay, their approach was, all right, we know who Julia was then in terms of on paper, and who you are now, but what does Julia want? What does Julia want for the future? So it was, who is Julia then, who is she now, and who does she want to be? And how do we implement a plan of care? Here are our recommendations. So they recommended that I do some further diagnostic testing with them. They recommended a lumpectomy to go in and remove a margin of tissue around the site of the original tumor, which is standard protocol, and also the sentinel node biopsy. So our breasts are like ducts, like the ceiling in this building. So it's this series of ductwork that milk is designed to flow through, basically, and they can inject dye into the duct, which is at the site of the original tumor or tumors, and it will drain over a certain period of time, and it'll show them the pathway to this lymph node that is the sentinel node. And so they'll know when they do surgery which nodes to biopsy or to remove, instead of the old way where they would take out 20, 30 nodes and women were left with disfiguration and lymphedema and all of that. So I decided that I would do that. So I came home, and then about 3 weeks later I flew back for the surgery, which is outpatient. And they asked me, well, what is your plan B if for some reason we find something? And I said, I really don't have a plan B. I really feel strongly that what I've implemented for the last 3 months is working. I feel terrific. So they did some blood work, and after the blood work, they said, wow, your tumor markers are within normal range, and so is most of your other blood work. So whatever you're doing seems to be working, but, what's your plan B? You're going to be sedated. And I said, well, I really want like a light sedation. I don't want to be completely knocked out. And, let's just proceed, with what you're going to do. And, I'm just confident that, I'm going to be okay. And they were like, well, how can you be confident? And I said, I just have a peace, like I don't really want to do any more drastic surgery or do any, major reconstruction. So they went in, they did the lumpectomy. The doctor sort of woke me up and said, your margins are clean, the lymph nodes are clean. We didn't expect this, but this is great news. They sew you back up. You're in the recovery room for a few minutes. The worst part of it is the nausea from the anesthesia. And then you're sent home. So in my case, I went to go stay with my cousin who lived in Houston, and another cousin of mine who had come to be with me who lived in Dallas, and spent the night and flew home the next day, and never looked back in terms of my protocol, but spent the last, so that was, it'll be 16 years, March 16th.
So tomorrow.
Yes. So this is sort of my anniversary.
Wow.
And so along that road, I met lots of other great people who helped me, who came alongside of me, too numerous to mention. One in particular, Ann Fonfa from the Annie Appleseed Project, whose advisory board I now sit on, and we're advocates for people with cancer. We provide education and advocacy. Her website really brought me to a lot of great information, and others, and doctors. So I have my team, and every year I go to MD Anderson and I get checked out, traditionally, by Dr. Merrick Ross, who is an amazing doctor. And at the time, he said, about 15% of my patient population does a natural or has implemented a natural protocol. So this is not unusual to us, but we like to monitor you. So for the first 5 years, they really wanted me to have quarterly blood work or come twice a year, and now I'm there like once a year. So, and then I have other doctors who help me. So I have an herbalist, Chinese, a fourth generation Chinese herbalist in New York City, who I get my herbs from quarterly. The herbs, they look like little packets of coffee. They're brown and they don't taste really great, but they're like super fantastic. I mean, they make you feel so good. And of course, wheatgrass doesn't taste that great either. But I'm still, just doing a little shot, better than the way tequila tastes for me anyway, right? So, I'm still doing the same platform. I have, through the years, continued to do research. Every single week I'm doing research. Things change. My outlook on something changes, or I might implement a new supplement or a new nutrient. I think the mistake that a lot of people make, because I'm out there in the cancer world as an advocate, is when you have cancer, you read an article and you think, okay, I got to take that. Or somebody says, I did this and you should do this. Or, it shouldn't be based on that. It should be based on, obviously, science and, researching products and making sure they're vetted and that they're clean. And so there's that part. But there's also having a team or somebody that you can go to who is an expert, because we're not experts, who can say, you know what, I really do like this product, or you know what, I've got another product that I've vetted for my patients that I think would be better for you. So I think the more people you talk to, lay people that you talk to, the more confusing it gets. So you need to kind of stick true to, your protocol and implement things that are going to work for you. So somebody might not need what I need or needed. Most of us women are deficient in vitamin D. D3 is something that really helped me to get back on track. So I had the surgery. I came back. I continued to implement this plan of care. I did not do any drugs or tamoxifen or any of the follow-up things. I take a product that one of my doctors gets for me, which modulates my estrogen, which is what tamoxifen does.
Okay.
But it's made out of broccoli. So, broccoli, drugs, drugs, broccoli. For
Right.
me it was broccoli. So I've been taking that since I started, so I still take it. So some of the things I took I eliminated because I didn't need them anymore, and some of the things I take now I didn't know I needed or I learned about. Coconut oil, I implemented a little bit later on because I found out about it. It's one of these things that's just a miracle, because it's an anti-inflammatory, an antifungal, an antibiotic. You can put it on your hair, your skin. It's got some SPF, everything. It's like perfect. You can cook with it. I do a teaspoon of it in the morning, or I'll like throw it in a green drink.
Okay.
I'll mix a green drink in the morning. So I still do what I have been doing, what I started to do. Sometimes I'll throw in a piece of wild salmon or a piece of cheese if I'm craving some Italian tasty treat.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. Was it hard to kind of
It
just
was. Oh my gosh, it was hard. And you're eating all these things you never heard of, names, like bok choy and chia seeds and maca and, wheatgrass, and for my beloved pasta and bread and chicken and cheeses and all of that. So I've learned a lot about the food industry, how to eat clean, which is becoming increasingly more difficult in today's world. We don't even realize that half of the things we eat are, GMO.
Right.
So I just learned recently that I think almost 100% of the soy that's available in supermarkets is genetically modified. So, that was kind of alarming to read. So I do occasionally have, a hot fudge sundae with my nieces, a piece of pizza with my mom, or, my boyfriend, or I'll have, some fish but it's hard. It's hard to eat clean,
Mhm.
But I do, I implement a gluten-free 90%, and most of what I eat is 70% raw, 30% cooked.
Okay.
Quinoa is a staple for a vegan or a vegetarian because it's a complete protein, so it's like sitting down and having a steak. You can have a big bowl of it, and you can put all kinds of great things to change the flavor and the taste.
Yeah.
So I do implement a lot of that, and so basically that's sort of, the cliff notes of my journey. Of course, there have been a lot of other people and things along the way.
So do you think you would have eventually switched to a raw vegan diet because you were trying to be a healthy person before the cancer, or you don't know?
I don't know because all of a sudden, after I implement, it's an interesting question, and some of my athlete friends and I talked about it because right after I implemented this diet change, I started reading all these articles that started becoming more mainstream about elite athletes becoming vegans or vegetarians, and debunking the myth that you need to eat all this meat and protein in order to perform at high levels. So I'm not sure. It's hard to say. It's hard to say, but I'm really glad that I did. And honestly, it may sound like it now that all of these changes and choices were easy, but they really weren't. I made these decisions based on, feeling a peace about them, having the education, and it was the hardest decision I ever made, but it was the best decision ever in my life to take charge, to get back to the reasons why, and sort of build again my body and my mind and my heart and my soul, becoming a better person out of it, because you're not only purging junk and cleansing your body. And I did a cleanse also. It's really important to start with a cleanse, like a juice fast, to, make the ground fertile again and then start putting all the nutrients in. But you're purging out a lot of junk from your brain, and it's important to have sort of that circle of balance so that you are focused on the right things. And my focus was not on the right things. It was on closing the next deal and being successful and having money and having a closet full of designer clothes and shoes, and some of which I still do have. They're getting older, but it wasn't about that. It was about living a better life, being healthy, but being that way so that I could share and encourage and love on other people who are going through the same thing, because that's what I had. And so where I find my balance and my joy is when I'm actually out speaking or at an event or, encouraging someone one-on-one. That's where I find my balance and my peace and my joy. And if I could do that full time, that would really be my choice,
And what about your book?
So in 2006 or 2005, I was talking to Dr. Merrick Ross during one of my visits, and I said, I've got these notebooks filled with information, stacks of things, and because I like to write things down. I find that when I write something, I remember it.
Right.
And, going back to, studying 101, right? You gotta write it down. You gotta memorize it. And I have this concept for a book that I think would be really helpful for other women. And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to start looking into it. And I was living in Florida at the time. I had moved there for 5 years, working on a project. Part of my healing platform was to kind of get out of town for a few years. So I came up with this prototype, and it's a small little book. It looks like a notebook with a spiral. And it's a reference guide. So basically it's the 101, the clinical and the environmental aspects of breast cancer. So here's what you need when you're newly diagnosed. And it really encompasses years of research and reading books and watching videos so that somebody who is diagnosed or wants to take a preventative view at their fingertips could have pretty much all they need, and then websites and links to here's how you dig deeper. So I wanted to kind of give back what it took me so long to find, including a glossary of terms, which is the scariest thing because you're reading all these books and brochures that the doctors give to you, and you don't understand half of the words. I thought I had a pretty good vocabulary, but you're looking at medical terms,
right,
albeit some of them you've heard, most of them you've never heard before in your life. And when you're in visits and you're meeting with doctors and they're using a lot of these terms, or you're just doing research, you have to really know what you're reading. So I would highlight all these words. So I took all the highlighted words that were words that I needed to look up, and I put a glossary in sort of the center of the book to separate the clinical and the environmental side of the book, so that in lay terms you could understand what it is you're looking at and reading. And honestly, a lot of the books you read are scary. They scare you.
It makes your diagnosis even more scary.
It does. It really does. And, it's the information hasn't changed. You go on all the top cancer websites, and some of the organizations that do not-for-profit work, American Cancer Society, Susan G. Komen, Livestrong, some of the top ones. You go on these sites and they all basically have the same information from brochures, from medical journals, from somebody who wrote them years ago on, well, here's what you should be doing. And a lot of that has changed. So it's a lot of old information. And the mainstream information is pretty typical. I mean, it's surgery, radiation, chemo, drugs. That's basically it. They don't even talk to you about alternative protocols or food or nutrition. And so I wanted to have a book that was not sort of in your face or pointing fingers, but here's the information. What's inside your breast? What can you expect? What are the stages? What do they mean? Some of the statistics. Here's some great websites that you might not necessarily find somewhere else that you might want to check out. So a lot of that. And then I talk a lot about food and nutrition. So, I talked to Dr. Ross about it, and he goes, I love it. I'll help you. I'll edit it for you from a clinical aspect. I'll write an introduction. I ended up convincing him to write a chapter. And then came back to Greenwich, where I was born, and have a lot of contacts, and started calling all my friends and calling in all my favors. Okay, I need an editor for free. I need a graphic designer for free. I need, help me. So I'm going to self-publish this book. But while I was in Florida, before I came here, I met a guy down there who was one of the pastors at the church I went to. He's Billy Graham's grandson, Pastor Tavijan, and I told him about the book, and I said, one day I just said, would you pray for me? Because I'm not sure how I'm going to get this book done. And a week later he called me and he said, hey, Julia, you need to call this guy and he's going to help you find a publisher. So I met with this guy. I showed him the manuscript. He loved it. About a month later, he said, call this girl. She's in Atlanta. She has a publishing company. And I think she's the one that's going to be able to help you and get this done rather economically, but nicely. So I called Bridget, her name was Bridget, and I sent her the manuscript. And about a week later, she called me and she was crying. And she's like, this is just amazing because I'm reading your manuscript, I'm learning all this new stuff, and I get diagnosed with breast cancer. So it was really cool. So all these little amazing miracles along the way. We became really good friends. She nurtured me, helped me through the publishing side of it, which I had no clue about. It's really complex, as you probably know. So we got it published in 2006, latter part of 2006, and I was suddenly selling books on a website and, having speaking engagements, and so it was fun. I gave away about 2,000 books, probably sold 4,000. But the whole object of this was not to sell books and make money. It was to share information. And so it became really cool and exciting to see what had happened and all the people that sort of come into your life as a result of it. And then I was interviewed. I was asked to come on NBC. I did a demo of a healthy shake at the Today Show, South Florida. I did Fox News in New York with Dr. Manny Alvarez, to name a few, and lots of radio, W880, WCBS 880, did a lot of radio spots with them, and a lot of interviews in magazines, Self, Vogue, and it was fun. It was fun to be able to share the information, and I still go out and speak and moderate patient panels and do some things at conferences, and because it's just ongoing. It's for the rest of my life. It's my other job.
And now, if someone is going through a cancer diagnosis and they're considering the path you took, what's your number one piece of advice?
My number one piece of advice is that you have to have a peace about what you're doing. Otherwise, it's negative energy or conflicting energy coming into your healing. So how do you get that peace? Some people pray, some people meditate, some people do yoga. Some people have a peace because of the education that they're doing. But I believe you have to have a peace, you have to be centered, and be able to make the decision for yourself. Can't have a spouse, a boyfriend, a parent, a doctor make the decision. I find that women I talk to later on will say, oh, I wish I had been more present in my decision. now, like 5 years later or 10 years later. So you have to feel good about it, have a vision for where you're going to be. I had a vision that I was going to be healthy. I had a vision for where my life was going to be, and go for it. The rest of the stuff, is important as well, but that's the one thing I say. So if your choice is to have chemo or if your choice is not to have chemo, you have to have a peace about it. You can't do it because you're being told to do it. You have to do it because you're doing the research and then making the decision.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's just been so great talking with you. And I do actually have one thing I want to say, because you're young and beautiful, and so many women are getting diagnosed earlier in life, teens, 20s, 30s. It's not a disease for somebody in their 50s and above anymore, because there's so many environmental issues, so many environmental bombs coming at us every day, whether it's pollution or the water we drink or the food we're eating or the stress we're digesting. So, and those are the environmental aspects. And 85% of all breast cancers are environmental, not hereditary, which is a huge misconception. So 15% of the women who will get breast cancer have some sort of a genetic background, but 85% of us are, it's due to our environment. So it's 20 years or 10 years of bad decisions or things that have been affecting us. So we have to really be aware of that. The other thing, the takeaway thing that really blew my mind was that mammography is only 50% accurate. So MRIs and ultrasounds and thermography are really the key, and self-exams, learning how to self-exam. So that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really
Thank you,
appreciate you
Taylor.
sitting down with me. Again, this is Julia Chiappetta, and for the Greenwich Sentinel, I'm Taylor Knight.